Authority meeting of the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority. Right. I was going to tell you to stand by for a fire alarm, but we've already had it. This meeting is being held remotely and members are in attendance via video conferencing. The meeting is being live streamed on the authority's website and will also be available for repeated viewing. Those participating in the meeting are consenting to being recorded and use of those images for broadcast purposes. I welcome Enzo Regalia, Assistant PCC, who is in attendance. So we've had the fire alarm test, so I don't need to mention that. This meeting is being broadcast via the media channel from HFRS headquarters, and therefore, this is about the fire alarm, so forget that. I will begin by naming the members who are in attendance for the public records. I'm Councillor Chris Carter, the chairman of the meeting. Also present, Councillor Rod Chad, vice chairman, Councillor Liz Fairhurst, Councillor Jason Fazackerley, Councillor Jonathan Glenn, Councillor Jeff Hockley, Councillor Sharon Mintoff, Councillor Roger Price, Councillor David Simpson is apologies, Councillor Dave Stewart representing the Isle of Wight, and then Councillor Iridian Vaughan. During the meeting, if a member wishes to speak, they will indicate to me by using the raise your hand function as the primary method. In the event that that function is unavailable to you, the secondary method is to use the meeting chat function and type RTS request to speak. All decisions will be reached through a vote conducted by calling out abstain, against or for, with a pause for opportunity so members can speak at the relevant time. The outcome of the vote will be confirmed by Katie Sherwood, the Democratic and Member Services Officer. I would like to remind members that the Constitution's standing orders will apply, so please keep your microphone muted unless you've been called to speak, and you may be visible on the screen to the public. Right, so can everybody hear me? I seem to have got a bit of feedback here, but can you all hear me okay?
Turn your microphone down on the side.
Yeah, we're okay.
I'm turning.
That's better.
Is that better? Okay. Right, so moving on with the agenda. Apologies for absence, item 1. Well, we have Councillor Simpson.
Chairman, just to confirm that Councillor Chad is not here at the moment, but she will be joining in 20-30 minutes or so.
Ah, thank you for pointing that out to me, Katie. Yes, I should have said that I was aware that, that there's another meeting taking place, and I know Councillor Chad will be joining it, and that reminds me, Councillor Fairhurst, you're with us now, but you may have to leave at I think you told me 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
Yes.
Councillor Carter, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Right. Item 2 on your agenda, declarations of interest, which I will read for the benefit of the tape, to enable members to disclose to the meeting any disclosable pecuniary interest they may have in any matter on the agenda for the meeting, where that interest is not already entered in the authority's register of interest, and any other pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest in any such matter that members may wish to disclose. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting, page 5 in your pack. So taking those page by page, page 5, page 6, and that is all the minutes. So you content that that is a true record of the meeting that took place on the 9th of December?
Agreed, Chairman.
Agreed, thank you. Any matters arising? Well, the only real item on the agenda was the budget update, was clearly that's going to be discussed at this meeting today. Right, so that completes the minutes. Item 4, deputations. I have none. Item 5, Chairman's announcements. One or two things to bring to your attention. So, first of all, COVID response. Both Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Services are supporting South Central Ambulance Service and the Isle of Wight Ambulance Service, respectively, with ambulance driving support, and have increased our co-responder and medical response capacity. Our health partners are experiencing unprecedented activity in intensive care units and reduced staff numbers owing to sickness and self-isolation because of COVID-19. They have requested our urgent support in intensive care settings, and after scoping, we've agreed to offer volunteers. Volunteers continue to be sought and are being assessed for suitable work in this demanding and emotionally challenging environment. Overall, we've had a fantastic response to our calls for volunteers, with around 200 personnel volunteering to date. Furthermore, an internal risk assessment cell is in place with a significant amount of work underway to risk assess various additional activities to support partners, including the support within hospital intensive care units and the provision of vaccinators. Well, I think we all saw Basingstoke on the TV, and what a fantastic response that was. It came over very well on the TV, and I'm sure you will all agree, wish to agree with me in thanking our volunteers for the fantastic work that they're doing, both at Basingstoke and elsewhere within Hampshire and the Chief Officer, is there anything you just wish to add? Because it's a developing situation, and it's probably different today than it was yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, members. First thing to say, I'm enormously proud of not only my teams, across Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire Rescue Service, but indeed the whole of the partnership across public services and beyond, third sector and others across our area. We've been enormously impressed with how quickly all those organisations have come together to get behind the massive pressure on our communities right now and their concerns. And COVID-19 is a terrible virus, and if anything pleasing comes out of this terrible time is how organisations come together to fight against and protect our communities, and I'm excited about that. But our part at the Fire and Rescue Service, and I really want to be careful how I position this, because the Fire and Rescue Service sometimes gets the limelight in the press, like sometimes the MOD does, and we're very sensitive about that. But I don't want to take away from how proud I am of my teams across Hampshire and Isle of Wight in stepping into these spaces to assist. And the word volunteer, I want to make sure we stress that. The word volunteer in the Chairman's update is critical, because they are still working for the fire service. They're still operating under the guise of the Fire Rescue Services. But as you'll probably be aware, some of these activities I would not compel my teams to do. Instead, we're saying you'll still be working for us. We'd urge you or ask you if you want to step forward to do that work, because some of this work is particularly specialist. And we have teams in University South Hospital, as well as moving into the Basingstoke Hospital, to help prone patients and turn patients We are one of the few, in fact, the only service in the country doing that as a fire rescue service, but we are a drop in the ocean compared to NHS colleagues that are doing this day in, day out. So all credit to them and our NHS teams that are doing an amazing job. The work we're doing in a vaccination centre, Basingstoke has certainly caught the headlines, and of course that's lovely for us as a fire authority and indeed the fire service to be able to assist in this massive push towards getting people vaccinated. There are lots of other vaccination centres across our area, and our teams in health are doing such a tremendous job in getting these centres opened, getting them running, getting volunteers in to get the process running. And for those people who have had the benefit of vaccinations, I'm sure that you will see what a fantastically fluid system that is. That's very impressive indeed. So there's lots of other things the Fire Rescue Service is doing, and I'm sure you are rightly proud of that work. My thanks to Chief Steve Apter and his team in terms of directing and running the Gold Group across Hampshire and Wight. It is a complex arena, trying to make sure we protect our core roles as Fire Rescue Service, as well as stretch into and step into other spaces to assist our hard-working colleagues across the space. But we are absolutely into everything we possibly can be. We'll continue to do that into the future. A forward-leaning organisation that we are, and we are here to help our colleagues across the health system and beyond to make sure that we protect our communities as best we can. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chief Officer. Well, I did refer briefly to Basingstoke earlier on, which I saw Steve Apter on the television, and he did speak very well. And it was really important that he was able to emphasise, notwithstanding the vaccination centre established there, Basingstoke Fire Station remained fully operational. And I think that was an important message for the public to be aware of. It was also good to see that there were retained firefighters there working as volunteers. So it's across all the services, the volunteers. So it's excellent, congratulations and appreciation to the work that's taking place. So moving on,
Hands up, Chairman.
oh, somebody's so Councillor Glenn, yes.
Right, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say that it's a sort of sense of pride I feel that I'm a member of the Hampshire Fire and Rescue Authority with regards to the Basingstoke fire station going operational on the 18th of January. It's given me great pleasure to report this to all my parish council meetings. I've got 7 parish councils in my division, and it's actually a joy to actually attend and basically say, you know, I'm on the HFRA board, and it's a really good feeling that we're part of such a positive job that we're doing with the fire service. I did send an email immediately to the Chief Fire Officer, and you know, it's the PR and the exposure that we've got through this is fantastic.
Thank you for that, Councillor Glenn. Councillor Stewart. I think you're muted.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, firstly, an apology, Chair. I just wanted for the record on the minutes to have my name added to the list of attendees for. It's not a problem. It's a minor area. What's probably more important in relation to the comments by our Chief Fire Officer, as per my comments at our previous meeting, I want to recognise the fantastic work that the firefighters and support staff are all doing, both here in Hampshire and on the island. And I know my colleagues would want me to echo that thanks. And it's certainly not a light-hearted thanks. It's a genuine appreciation for the high standard of work and flexibility of our public services. And I hope when we do a review, which I'm sure we will, of all the responses, the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire Authority will be able to confidently recognise the standards that have been delivered, and I'm sure with the envy of other parts of the country. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for that. My apologies for the minutes. Katie, are you listening in there? Can we make sure that the minutes are amended to record?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and apologies, Councillor Stewart.
Councillor Stewart. Right. So moving on with my announcements. Now we come to inspection, virtual inspection update, and 2020 HMIC FRS commissioned by the Home Secretary to inspect how fire and rescue services in England were responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. Both Hampshire and the Isle of Wight fire and rescue services were assessed together between the 20th of October and the 3rd of November. The Hampshire and Isle of Wight report, alongside a national report and local reports for all other fire and rescue services, was published on the 22nd of January. The report is positive in a wide range of areas. For example, building on the 2018 inspection findings, it makes various positive conclusions about the service's focus on the well-being of staff. HMI Matt Parr concluded overall that, in summary, we are impressed by how the service adapted and responded to the pandemic. Responded to the pandemic effectively to fulfill its statutory functions, protect the public and support staff well-being. The report also flagged 3 areas of focus which we look forward to seeing how the service responds to. These areas of focus are being considered as part of the service's organisational planning. Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service continues to support partners and our communities as the pandemic continues. And further, with regard to the inspection, I was in a virtual meeting just recently with the inspectors, which essentially was dealing with the structure for the tranche 1 and 2 inspections, which well, tranche 1 is happening now virtually. Hampshire and Isle of Wight will be in tranche 3, and at the moment that is scheduled to take place in January 2022. So that's part of a year away, but a year can go by very quickly. So we will have access to the tranche 1 and 2 reports when they are published later this year, and I'm sure there will be significant learning available from those reports that we will endeavour to act upon if it's appropriate. Also at that meeting, the meeting was addressed by the Fire Minister, who obviously endorsed all the good work that's been done by fire services nationally with regard to COVID-19. He then went on to well, I'll be sort of diplomatic in use of his words. He was disappointed about the lack of agreement nationally with regard to the ongoing tripartite agreement, and he was, I think he was saying there is a need for reform in this area. So we'll await to see developments there. And he also advised that a report on the state of fire is due mid-March. So something else to look forward to there. Do you have anything you wish to add to that?
Thanks, Chairman. Just a quick one, I guess. One, delighted to have this report from the HMI. It's always reassuring, and we treated this as almost an interim inspection, albeit it was focused on our response to COVID and our ability to continue our services. But what was particularly pleasing in this review was the marked improvement in terms of how our staff felt looked after and informed and supported going through this. That was really pleasing to see. We hope to build on that in the next year before the next full inspection, because that was, as you'll know, a point which was raised in our first inspection or where it needed improvement. So delighted to see that, and we'll focus on doing that some more. Supports the point I made earlier about the ongoing focus on our core roles, as well as stretching out into other areas, supporting our community more widely. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. So moving on, whole-time firefighter recruitment. At the end of last year, we undertook a whole-time recruitment campaign for both Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Services. We received 1,200 applications for approximately 30 current vacancies. Just under half of the vacancies have been filled by on-call firefighters who wish to join the full-time duty system. There is also a whole-time course starting in March, which will have 13 new trainees, 3 of whom are existing Green Book staff within HFRS. Our continued use of social media and our positive action campaign have proven successful in attracting a more diverse range of candidates to our organisation. This has resulted in 1/3 of our new trainees being female. In addition, over 15% of the on-call to whole-time transfers were female. As a result of the huge interest in joining our services, we've also been able to create a talent pool of individuals who can fill future vacancies as they arise or participate in the next training courses. There are 72 individuals in the talent pool, over 25% of whom are female. So that's really positive news going forward, and congratulations to everybody who's been facilitating that recruitment process. So finally, this is the last meeting of the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority. Shadow Authority, I should have said so. On behalf of the authority, I would like to thank all officers for their continued support of the combined fire authority activity. This is the last meeting of the Shadow Authority. The Shadow Authority has had limited functions during the shadow period, namely to bring the combination scheme into full effect on the 1st of April. Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority will take full responsibility from the 1st of April, and the first full meeting of that new authority will be on the 14th of April next. So it's been, well, we were delayed by about a year by the government having other things that they had to focus upon. But that was perhaps beneficial because it enabled our officers to focus on making sure that everything was fully in line for the creation of the new authority. And indeed it has been. So whilst taking the opportunity to thank all the staff and officers of both authorities that will come together for the new authority, I also wish to place on record our appreciation for all the work that has been taking place to create the new authority. There's been a significant amount of work that has occurred over these last 2 years, I think. So, okay, I think that's all from me on those matters, unless anybody's got anything else they wish to add. Do you want to say anything more?
Thank you, Chairman. Just one on behalf of the service, if you like, the services across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. Thank you for your continued leadership. These are not always easy times, not only with COVID going on, but obviously a combination going through in the process, complicated process. So thanks to my officers, but importantly, thank you to you for your ongoing leadership in this space. And it's always helpful to be able to process these decision points quickly for us, so we can get on with the business in hand. So I'm grateful for that as well. Thank you.
And that reminds me of one other thing. I'll just add that in part of the virtual inspection, I was interviewed virtually by Matt Parr, the inspector, and one of the things that I was able to emphasise with him, that notwithstanding everything that was happening to support the COVID pandemic, business as usual was carrying on as if there wasn't a pandemic. Everything was still happening, including the transition to the new authority on the 1st of April. So it's quite incredible, really, that all that has been able to happen. And really, I'm so proud to be the chairman of the authority.
Chairman.
Okay, so Jonathan, yes.
Chairman. It reminds me to say I'd like to pay tribute to your chairmanship over this period that we've been going through the combined, working towards a combined authority. It's been very exemplary. You've done it superbly. And, you know, as a committee, we should all thank you very much, Chris.
Well, thank you for that, Jonathan. Right, so moving on then to member development. All I have to say here is that there's the LGA conference that takes place 1st to the 4th of March. I sent you out a link to that, and I would, it's obviously a virtual conference. It's free to us, and you can all join in and take part in these webinars, which I think will be really useful. So if you haven't already signed up to it, I would commend that to you, because I think that will be, well, going back to the inspection, one of the things that will be necessary to demonstrate to the inspectors is that the authority is keeping itself informed of developments, and going into these webinar conferences is certainly one way of doing it. So I commend that to you. I don't think I've done anything else since the last meeting. So anybody else got anything to say? Ros, I see you're there. The diversity webinar that should take place last week was cancelled, but I know you're going to take part in the LGA webinar on diversity. So anything else you wish to add about that?
No, nothing from me. It was just disappointing that the network meeting was cancelled, but I look forward to the LGA webinar on it. Right,
thank you. I think I can share with you why it was cancelled. Well, the message that came to me was it was cancelled because it coincided with a Labour Party conference. Well, I'll leave it to you to decide whether that was a valid reason for cancelling that event. Anyway, anybody got any other comment? Anything else they wish to add? Right. Okay. Oh, Sharon, are you raising your hand? Yeah.
Yes, I am. Sorry. That's the first I've heard about a Labour Party conference, so I don't think that was actually the case, to be quite honest.
Well, I only mentioned that, Sharon, because that was the message that came to me. I think Ros Chad, that came via the LGA. So you know, I'm not making that up.
No, I don't think you are, but I think there may have been some crossed wires somewhere or another, and that maybe they thought there was something going on, but no, there wasn't. Just
okay. All
so,
right.
not accusing you of crossed wires, but somewhere else.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Right. So we can now move on to the substantive agenda, and item 7 on your papers, page 9. Please turn to that page. And this is transfer existing approved policies. And I'd like Steve Apter to introduce this report, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, members. We've just clocked over to midday. Firstly, in terms of introducing this paper, it links nicely to the conversation you've just had, and my thanks for your thanks on behalf of the CFA programme. The amount of work that's been going on by the team is incredible, and this paper is kind of demonstrates that final detail level that we're at now as we start to land and bring the combination together, the new combined service. What this paper is a bit of tidy up governance. So a number of policies and position statements are owned currently by Hampshire Fire Authority as part of our framework. This paper seeks to transfer those policies over to the new authority so that policy position continues and we don't have a breakdown in the governance process going forward. So it's part of the detail level of where we are now with the CFA. Those paragraph 10 in the paper are identified of those authority level policies, such as the overarching risk management policy that you can see identified in paragraph 10. In paragraph 11, it sets out those position statements. Interestingly enough, earlier on, we were talking about the sprinkler policy position. Well, those positions of the authority will transfer across. That doesn't mean they can't be debated, amended in the future, of course, but this is more about just ensuring from a governance perspective, they move with you across to the new authority. It also identifies another suite of principles that have been signed off by the authority, and they are the authority approved 5 design principles as part of the service improvement plan, or in terms of station and the built assets. So in essence, this paper proposes the recommendation and conclusion down at paragraph 32 that the shadow authority approve the transfer of those currently approved HFRA policies and position statements. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
So where do we, remind me where we find the design principles?
So I think Matt's on the call. Matt will be able to identify and where they are set out in terms of the design principles, but obviously they're referred to as part of their designs and building proposals that come forward. But I know Matt's on the call. Could I signpost you that?
It doesn't actually specify in the report where they are, if members want to refer to those.
That's a really good point, Chairman. If Matt's on the call.
Yep, I can take that question. And the design principles are going to be, currently within the estate strategy, which is its own document, and they're also going to be on our website, which is currently being redone for the new CFA. So they will be on the website as well as part of the estate's pieces of work. Fine,
thank you, Matt. So members, note that going forward, because there's quite a lot going on with the future estate, and there will be further things going on the island. So you will perhaps want to refer to those design principles in the future. Any comments, anybody? Any questions? Sharon, Councillor Mintoff.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure if this is the right place to ask it. Talking about the governance, at the moment, the requirement for H4A meetings to be quora is that at least 2 of the authorities are represented. Previously, it used to have to be the 3, but then when we reduced in size, we changed that requirement from 3 constituent authorities being represented down to 2. Will that change again? It is a governance issue, so I thought I'd raise it here.
Right. That's a constitutional matter, I believe. Paul, are you with us?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yes, the quorum for Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority is set out in the combination order, and off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure it's again 50% of the members, including at least any 2 of the constituent authorities.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I couldn't remember that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. Anybody else want to comment on anything? Well, are you content with that? Oh, you switched off. Are you content, Sharon, with that?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. So I'll take you to page 13, please, members, with the recommendations, and I'll read them. That the Shadow Authority approve the transfer of approved HFRA policies, position statements, and the 5 design principles to HIWFRA commencing 1st of April 2021. The Shadow Authority support the continued operation of the established PPG framework for the new CFA. Everybody content with those recommendations, members? Agreed? I take that as unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, so move now to page 15. Agenda item 8, Health, Safety and Wellbeing Statement of Intent. This is Steve Apter again. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, members. So again, on an annual basis, you'll be aware as Hampshire Fire Authority, we produce under the Health and Safety at Work Act, and specifically the Management of Health and Safety at Work regs, our annual Statement of Intent. The Statement of Intent is the senior leaders, along with the Chief Officer, the statement that sets out our general policy on health and safety and wellbeing at work. It sets out our commitment. And what you'll see in the paper is how this supports our safety plan priorities around the health, safety and wellbeing of our people. But furthermore, it's in line with the new authority. So it's been branded and is signed or proposed to be signed by the Chair and the Chief Officer in their capacities as Chair and Chief of Hampshire and Isle of Wight going forward. The statement is attached and it's a standard document. It's recognised by HSE, but in terms of setting out our principles, our priorities and our commitment. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Any questions, members? Okay, I'll take you to page 17, the recommendation that the Health, Safety and Wellbeing Statement of Intent is approved by the Shadow Authority for display from the 1st of April 2021. Everybody happy with that? Thank you, that is agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. So we can now move to agenda item 9, still with Steve Apter. Health, no, beg your pardon. Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service Safety Plan, Year 2 Improvements.
Thanks again, Chair. So members will recall sorry, there's some questions, Chair, before I go on.
Have we got a question?
Jason's hands up.
Jason, your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't want to interrupt. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt Steve, so feel free to carry on. I was just giving you an indication that I had a question once I finished.
No worries at all. I wasn't sure it was related to the previous. Thanks ever so much. So the members will recall we took, members took a decision last year to produce a co-joint Hampshire and Isle of Wight safety plan, which fulfills the statutory duty of the integrated risk management plan. As part of the safety plan, which reset our new priorities as an organisation across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, it also includes our annual improvement plan, those specific actions that we as the service seek to deliver on your behalf as part of the improvements against those priorities. So you'll be aware that we report on performance against those separately. That's not the purpose of this paper. The work that's been going on over and above COVID, and I think you'll agree, we are still setting out a really quite challenging suite of improvements, but that's the nature of where we're at within this within the year 2 improvement proposals. What it sets out is against those priorities, the directors and the executive group working with our teams have looked at what we've achieved, what we seek to achieve for the next year. And in essence, the paper sets out those improvements we're proposing over and above business as usual for the next financial year. There is as part of that process of that cross-directorate way of operating now, we've also highlighted where there's any potential financial implications for the implementation of those improvements. The majority of these are within existing resources, but you will see within the paper there is a financial request for reserves for a couple of items identified in the people and organisational development environment, and they are quite significant people focused activities and priorities. The improvements have been through a real process of distilling down with directors, and it is about continuing that progress and that journey that, as members, you've been had oversight of for some time now. So if I take you to the appendix, I don't want to go through the detail, but you'll see there are 30 identified year 2 improvements set out across directorates. And what we've tried to set out is what is it that delivery is aiming to achieve? What does it look like? And then how does that build on align to our priorities? The whole principle of the safety plan approach was to make sure we were priority and policy led so that we didn't go off on tangents. And this keeps us focused. We also know who owns and where the accountability for this sits. I think there's the final point for me, the way we've been operating, certainly over the last couple of years, it's far more cross-directorate, far less silo operating. And that activity, most of these activities involve teams right across the organisation. So the buy-in and the ownership across the service is increasing to our benefit, I feel. So happy to take any questions at that point, Chairman, because I appreciate there's a lot of detail in the paper.
Jason, you had your hand up.
I did indeed, Chair, and it's only an incy-wincy tiny little point here, but if I can take you to page 26, and it's column 8, under the rationale section, line 4. Steve, it's just for some reason there's a question mark in there. It says may positively contribute to organisation sustainability. Is that just a typo, or should that just be the organisations, or is it something suspicious?
Councillor Vizzackley, thank you. Yeah, that is a typo. It is the organisation sustainability plan. Thank you.
Gosh, I thought I'd uncovered something there. Okay.
No, there's a disciplinary process already started. Thank you for that.
Right. So where am I going to now? I think Jonathan, Glenn, you had a question. I've got Dave Stewart. I'm quite sure who was first there. I'll go to Dave Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to highlight to Mr. Apter, while he's still with us, numbers 8 and 29 on the plan, which both make reference to well-being. One of the things we've identified on the Isle of Wight is that there are going to be two long-term COVID impacts. One is the long COVID impact itself, the physical impact. The other is the mental well-being impact that is affecting so many people. I'm sure it's exactly the same in Hampshire as well as on the island. And so we're taking a positive step. In fact, we put some funds aside to look at how we can deal with the mental well-being aspect. I think it's good to see it in this plan. But what I'm hoping is there will be some joined up working across the partnerships on this. And so I just highlight that to him for his information. Thank him for including it in the actual documentation, and I hope he would agree with me that it would be an opportunity to tackle what will be an issue for, I'm sure, some of our firefighters as well as anybody else.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Absolutely, and I think the fact that we've got 2 out of the improvements over and above all the great work we're already doing recognises that. We recognise there is a long-term impact here across the partnership. We're working really closely across the LRF around this issue as well, because we're not going to be the only agency. But I think, so firstly, that's why it's a priority, and I completely agree. I think the second point is, and it's also that assurance, Councillor Stewart, about how we see this. This is across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. There will be some specifics in some local geographies, but this is a single organisational approach. I think that's what we've got to do, is maintain that link into the Isle of Wight Council in this case and others, where there's good pockets of really good activity taking place. How can we learn? And I think that's the point of the improvement number 8, which is about maximising the lessons and opportunities, because we know we haven't got all the answers. And
thank you.
That is perfect.
Just want to mention it's coming up on our ICP, our Integrated Care Partnership, and it will also be on the Health and Wellbeing Board as well as a priority issue. So I'm grateful that it's in this plan and does, as you say, echo the fact we've all identified the issue. We now need to deal with it because it's not going to go away. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Who else have we got? Any other comments? Any other questions? No. Steve, you have the recommendation for one-off funding to be used from the Transformation Reserve. I see the bulk of that funding is, well, in fact, 175,000 is alignment of on-call terms and conditions. Have you got any update on how that is progressing?
Sure, I'll bring Molly in a second. I know Molly's in the background on the call, but this is one of those combination, one of the operational alignment legacies that's going to take some time. Molly, I don't know whether you've got anything else to add there at that point.
Yes, good morning. Hi, so that piece of work is largely around the terms and conditions of our on-call employees across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. That piece of work hasn't been picked up as part of the CFA. We know that they have very different terms and conditions and working practices. And obviously, as we move forward, what we wanted to do was to ensure that staff are fully consulted and engaged in that process. And so that's a new project that we will be starting from April as part of our sort of safety plan year 2, working with all of the on-call employees to continue to build and improve and ensure that that's a sustainable model moving forward.
Fine, thank you, Molly. Right, members, can I take you to page 24, the recommendations that Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority approved the year 2 safety plan improvements, that Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority approved one-off funding of up to £205,000 for 21-22 to be met from the Transformation Reserve. Everybody content with those recommendations? Agree?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, moving on now to item 10. And this is internal audit charter and internal audit plan for 21-22. You can stand down now, Steve. It's Karen Shaw, if she's with us. You there? Oh yes, I see.
Chairman, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. So this report from me is in two parts this afternoon. First of all, I'm presenting the internal audit charter. The charter is required by internal audit standards and sets out the purpose, authority and responsibilities in respect of internal audit. This is a document that's been previously reported through the Standards and Governance Committee, so I'm sure it'll be very, very familiar to members who sit on that committee, and there's very little change to that was presented last year. The second part of the plan of the report is presenting the internal audit plan for next year, for 21-22. It's a risk-based internal audit plan, and there's two elements to it. First of all, the fire-specific systems relating to Hampshire and Isle of Wight, and we prepared that plan on the basis of discussions with senior managers across the service. We've also reviewed your updated risk registers. And the second part of the plan covers the shared services that you have with Hampshire County Council and Hampshire Police. There were also two elements to that. There were some changes in 2019. So the majority of those systems in shared services are now covered by your external auditors, Ernst & Young, under the International Standard on Assurance Engagements. And that provides them with the opportunity to provide assurance on those controls and operation of those controls across all partners, and not just those within Hampshire. So it makes absolute sense for that process to be carried out. But there are some areas that fall outside the scope of that work. So we continue to pick those up in a shared internal audit plan with Hampshire County Council and the police. All partners contribute days to that plan, but at the time of writing and still at the moment, that plan is in development. So I'm unable to present that to you today, but that will be included in the progress reports that we take to Standards and Governance Committee going forwards. That's actually agreed through the shared services governance processes. Just a couple of points to make, really. The plan is flexible. It's subject to regular review across the year, just because things are happening at such a fast pace at the moment. And it's really important to ensure that the resources are really targeted to the areas of highest risk. You'll also notice in the plan that the days are slightly higher than normal, 200 days compared to an average of 185 days in a typical year. I'm not particularly concerned about that because, as I say, it is flexible. It's commonplace that changes take place during the year, and we'll keep that under review with the Standards and Governance Committee as we progress. So I think that's the main headlines from me, but very happy to take any questions.
So, Karen, the reason why there's more data, is that because the way you set the plans, some elements within the plan take longer than other, or is there any specific reason for the more days?
Chairman, I think that's a great question. I think it's really just demonstrates where the authority is at the moment in terms of some fairly significant changes going on with the combined authority, a lot of developments. So as I say, the plan is risk-based. So we work very closely with your senior managers, and we look at the risk registers, and we identify the areas where we think internal audit review can add that value. So I think it's hardly surprising in a period of significant change that more areas have been identified. I think it's also worth sort of pointing out that I think the relationship that internal audits have had with the authority and with management over the last few years has really developed very, very well, very strong relationship now. And I think it's really opened out the conversations right across the service. So I think, you know, we're reviewing areas that perhaps we haven't reviewed in the past. So you know, and I think that's a really positive position to be able to report to you. I'm sure officers and the service may wish to comment on that, but from my perspective, as I say, I see that as a really that's exactly where I would want us to be.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen, for that. Do you want to add anything? So, members, any questions, any comments? No? Right. Well, thank you. Can I take you to the recommendation on page 36 that the internal audit charter and internal audit plan for 21-22 be approved by the Shadow Authority? All content with that? Or
agreed, Chairman.
Agreed. Thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you again, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Right, members, move now to, I suppose, the most important paper on the agenda, although every paper is important, but this is really sort of the highlight of the agenda. Item 11, budget and precept requirement, page 61. Can I confirm that you all have access to the addendum that came out last night? I know it was on mod.gov. You don't all have access to that, so you should have all received an email with Rob Carr's addendum. These are quite unprecedented times for treasurers to present their budget report when things are changing daily, and this is highlighted by the fact that this 12-page addendum just came out yesterday. So you're with us, Rob. Eager to.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
So over to you.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, members. What I would propose to do, Chairman, with your permission, is to first consider the main agenda item and take any questions that members may have on that item, and then we'll swap to the addendum, which of course contains all of the full recommendations from the original paper. I'll talk you through that, answer any questions on that, and then we can move to the recommendations. Are you comfortable with that?
I think that's an appropriate way forward, Rob. If I'm honest, I wasn't quite sure how you were going to deal with this, but that is the best way forward. And in taking the main paper, in presenting that, some of it you will obviously have to say that it will be covered in the addendum. So over to you to present your report.
Thank you. So obviously the main item covers a number of different issues. The primary purpose of the report is obviously to set the budget and the council tax. So that's what I'm mainly going to concentrate on, but also then happy to take any questions on any other elements of the report. So just in terms of a bit of background, to recall that we took a report to the September Shadow Authority, which basically took the two budgets of each of the services and then rolled those forward for inflation and other items that members had approved previously. And that September position showed us with a deficit of just over £1 million. Then in December, we took a further report which considered a number of growth items of just under £1 million, which the Shadow Authority approved, effectively taking the anticipated deficit to just under £2 million. Now that was before we had any information relating to the local government finance settlement, and before we had any information from the billing authorities on the collection fund positions and business rates, etc. So what I'd like to, and all of that was based, as we always do, on a 1.99% council tax increase, going up to the referendum threshold that is set by government each year. So that's what's recommended in this report, and all of the figures assume that is approved. So if I could just take you to paragraph 38, which is on pages 67 and 68. there's a table in there that just like to talk you through. So as I said, as a result of the September and December meetings, we ended up with a forecast deficit position of just under 2 million. And then the table on page 68 takes you through what are the main changes that have happened since then. So as part of the spending review, the government announced that there was the expectation of a public sector pay freeze for next year. And whilst the government doesn't actually set pay for either Green Book or Grey Book employees, we do think that there will be pressure to comply with that pay freeze. So for the moment, we've reduced the provision for the pay award within the budget, which has saved us just over £1 million on those forecasts. As part of the local government settlement, we did get a small increase in revenue support grant and in business rates top-up grant, and that together with some other changes that we took into account based on the early figures that we got from billing authorities, had a net benefit of 372,000. And then the next two items are really just some final work that we did on finalising the detailed budget, having combined the two service areas together. So whilst that is a net deficit of just over 100,000, that really just represents the sort of final detailed figures that we had produced for the two services. We've obviously got the station investment programme, which you've approved for Redbridge, and there's a report on the agenda today for Cosham. The financial implications of the potential borrowing start to come into effect next financial year, so we've built in 150,000 for that. And then perhaps somewhat unusually, I am also recommending a contingency level of just over £500,000, given the uncertainties that we've got in terms of business rate figures, council tax, and the fact that this is the first year of the new combined authority itself. I thought it was better to make sure that we had some provision in there to pick up on any issues that might arise during the year. Clearly, if that isn't needed, we can review what we do with that in the coming year. The report also includes the capital programme at Appendix C, but I have suggested that is updated as part of the addendum, and I'll come on to that later. But just to point out that capital programme does include the two items that you are considering today in respect of capital schemes approval. So we thought it was better to include those, so we've got an up-to-date position if you do approve those, and then we've got a full set of schemes represented in that appendix. So we have the usual fairly complex appendices around the reserve strategy in Appendix D, and the Treasury Management Strategy in Appendix E. And then we're also required now to produce a capital and investment strategy, which is at Appendix F to the report. Finally, you'll be aware that as Chief Financial Officer, I have to produce a separate assessment of the robustness of the estimates and the adequacy of reserves, which is known as the Section 25 report, and that's included for you at Appendix G. Just in terms of the medium-term position, and unfortunately I seem to have been saying this quite a lot over the last couple of years. So as you know, we were expecting a multi-year settlement as part of the spending review this time round, but again, due to COVID, that was agreed as a one-year settlement. So we're still in the position of not knowing the position beyond 21-22 in order to inform our medium-term planning. So we would hope that next year we will get a multi-year spending review, and hopefully by December we will know what that will mean for us as an authority going forward. So that was always going to pick up on that report, Chairman, but very happy to pick up any questions before we move on to the addendum.
Thank you, Rob. Councillor Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rob, within the report, it talks about under paragraph 21, page 64, about the increase in the council tax for Band D of £1.37. Have no problems with that at all. That's how it affects Hampshire. But it does affect the Isle of Wight in a totally different way, because the combination order set their figure to be at the basis of the same as ours, so that it went into line. But in actual fact, in reality, the Isle of Wight will be paying more than the £1.37 if you compare it with what their base before the figure which was accepted to be is the baseline. Should that not be there? I mean, to be open, because somebody might pick it up and say, well, from the Isle of Wight, and say, well, it's gone up more than £1.37. We know the reasons for it. The government agreed the base figure, and that's the reason for it.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. But I think that's a really good point. And actually, in the addendum, I did pick up that point in the recommendations that the increase of £1.37 and 1.99% is above the alternative notional amount that was agreed by the Secretary of State. But you are quite right in terms of residents of the Isle of Wight. It will be that £1.37 plus the difference between the notional amount and the notional council tax for the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service, which I think off the top of my head was about another £6. So yeah, you are correct technically. Yeah.
What I'm really saying, Rob, should we not say it so that it's open? People can then see it and say, well, this is what it is. I mean, because at the moment there is no recognition I don't think in any of the reports of what the actual increase in financial figures in pounds and pence on the island.
Yeah, so it was a fair point. So I'm happy to have something added to the minutes to reflect that point. Obviously, the reports are as they are written, and yes, I think you're right. It would have been good to include something just to clarify that for Isle of Wight residents.
So,
thank you.
Can you just draw our attention, moving to the addendum then, the recommendation on the addendum, which recommendation covers that point?
So it doesn't cover the specific point that Councillor Price was making, but it's paragraph 22, which says that it be increased by 1.99% above the alternative notional amount set for 2021. But I think I can work with Katie to reflect something in the minutes which says that the impact on the Isle of Wight residents is slightly higher than that, and I can get the exact figure.
Chair, if I could just come in on that point.
Yes, please carry on, Councillor Stewart.
Well, first of all, Rob, thank you for the report. I don't have the addendum in front of me. I'm grateful to Councillor Price for highlighting that point. Just one thing I was going to ask for was perhaps an email from your good self, just clarifying that, and also the positive contribution which I know the new fire authority is making to assets on the island, because I think I have mentioned this already to the public, and we have a full council meeting on the 24th when we set our budget, and typically on the Isle of Wight we actually refer to band C, because although the national principle is a band D, we often translate it because of the value of housing on the island, so that may well be taken into account, but it will, Councillor Price is absolutely right, it will be reflected. I like to be transparent. That would be very useful. And actually, I can then deal with that at the full council meeting when I'll be presenting the Isle of Wight Council budget. So if you could send me relevant information, I'll be grateful. Thank you for acknowledging that, Councillor Price. And yeah, we can deal with it in that way. And that aside, I'm very pleased with the report you've done.
Yeah, very happy to do that. And I think when we submitted the alternative notional amount to the Secretary of State, I think we did include some of those specific items in terms of what the majority of residents on the island would pay, as you say, because they're in lower council tax bands. So yeah, I can certainly reflect that as well.
Thank you. I mean, we've effectively worked out that whatever the outcome of the fire, the town and parish council precepts and the Isle of Wight Council aspect, we're still going to be just under £2 per person, depending if you're, as you know, a double occupancy household or a single one. So I just think that clarity can be achieved. And if you don't mind dropping me an email with that, because I didn't get maths at school, unfortunately, but I'm very pleased to work it with you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Very happy to do that. Chair, just are there any more questions on the main agenda item before we move on?
Let's just see. Anybody got any queries, any questions at this stage? No. Right. So move on, Rob, to.
Councillor Price has indicated.
Are you asking another question?
I just want to make a comment if I can, because I think otherwise you won't be able to get a comments in at a later stage. The only comment I'd like to make is I think that the whole problem we have with budgets, it's a moving beast, and you know, I think for the very first year it's very much a put your hand up in the air and say, well, we'll take those figures based on the information we have at the moment. And I don't think I've ever seen a situation where we've had so little concrete evidence to be able to form the full budget, because there's so many things which are happening. We don't know what the ongoing costs are going to be for COVID. We don't know what the pay increases, if any, is going to be. There's so many. We don't know where we're going to get any more money from the government in the way of grants for COVID. So there's so many ponderables. And I guess congratulate the officers in putting together a budget with really a lack of information.
Well, indeed, yes, thank you for that. I think that echoes the comments I made at the start of this agenda item when I cannot recall at any time whether that we had received a 12-page addendum the day before our meeting, which changes all the recommendations. Well, it doesn't actually change them, but it resets some of the recommendations. So that's not Rob and his team's fault. That reflects the situation that he's in, with things changing daily, quite unprecedented times and very, very difficult. So we move to the addendum, Rob.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, for those comments, Councillor Price. Yeah, I mean, in some respects, a lot of the more difficult work has been done by the billing authorities, because they've had to try and make sense of all of the various rate reliefs and all of the different grants that the government have given. And it was just unfortunate that we managed to pick a year to have quite an early fire authority meeting, which meant that we were quite up against the deadline for all of the numbers. So I would just like to thank all of the billing authorities in their efforts to actually get us those numbers, you know, prior to the start of this meeting. So just turning to the addendum, there are two main areas really that I want to pick up, which are changing. So the first one relates to the revenue account. So as mentioned, the billing authorities have been struggling to get any figures together for this year. We put out the original report in the knowledge that we would need to come back and revisit those. In particular, retained business rates was an area that they always struggle with, and even more so this time round. So as is usually the case, as the HMI point out, we've been quite prudent in the figures that we've put in. So in the main report, we had a revised deficit position of 1.244 million. And then in paragraph 4, I've got the changes to that position, which bring us down to a revised deficit of 778,000. The major change there was an improvement in the retained business rate figure. So we assumed a 5% loss. It's come out at less than that, but I would make the point we would normally expect to see an increase year on year in the retained business rates that we get, and we still have had a reduction of just over 100,000. So it's not a great position, but obviously it's better than the one presented in the original papers. On top of that, we also get Section 31 grant from the government for business rate release that they've put in. So we get that grant for lost income. And then finally, you'll know that the government put in a scheme to pay 75% of losses associated with collection fund deficits in the current year. As I put in the note, it didn't quite turn out like that. So some items were excluded from that, but nevertheless, we've still got £95,000 additional income as a result of those government grants. So overall, that's a £466,000 improvement. gives us a revised deficit of 778,000. We'd agreed previously as part of the medium-term financial plan that we would balance 21-22 through the use of reserves, and helpfully we've got the grant equalisation reserve, so we normally make a £625,000 contribution to reserves, so we'll not make that in 21-22, and we'll also utilise 153,000 of the reserve that we put aside in the current financial year to balance off the budget. And the positive position that leaves us in is that we've still got 472,000 of that reserve available for future years, and we'll make a third year's contribution in 22-23. So overall, that balances the budget without impacting on the council tax decision. Just draw your attention to paragraph 18. I have added a separate recommendation which allows me to make any minor changes to the budget. What I mean by that is if any of the figures from the districts were to change over the next few days, what I would do is balance those off with a further draw to or from reserves, and then that keeps the council tax recommendation the same at 1.99%, increasing the figure to £70.43. So that's that bit. Capital programme, I'm afraid I can't really blame this on COVID-19. So as part of putting together the final papers, it was brought to my attention that the way that we've been showing the capital programme is to exclude the revenue items of schemes, because technically speaking they don't qualify as capital expenditure. Personally, whilst that is strictly speaking true, my view is that as an authority, if you've approved £24.1 million for Redbridge Fire Station, then you should see £24.1 million in the capital programme for the fire station. The funding of that is something that the accountants can sort out at year end, and so I've insisted that we represent the capital programme so that you can see quite simply, the approvals that you have made for those major schemes. So that's represented at Appendix 3, and we also updated the financing to reflect that. Annex 4 to this addendum is a revised reserve strategy, and that just picks up on the fact that the draws from the grant equalisation reserve have changed as a result of the change in the deficit figure. So just turning to the recommendations, so effectively what I've done there is to either refer to an annex within this addendum or to the appendix in the original report. So the only changes within these recommendations are the revenue budget, which is represented at Annex 2 to pick up on those collection fund changes, the capital programme, as I've just described, at Annex 3, and then the reserves strategy at Annex 4 to this addendum. All the other recommendations refer to appendices in the original report. So that's all I had, Chairman. Happy to take any questions on the addendum.
So thank you for that, Rob. So how are we going to deal with this question that Councillor Price brought up about the council tax for the island? Does that need to be? Do we need an amended, or do we need another recommendation to deal with that? How are we going to? I think it was generally agreed that needs to be better defined within the recommendations.
Well, I think the recommendations are what the recommendations are. What I can do, if you can give me the freedom, is to work with Katie and to make sure that that point is reflected in the minutes when we approve the council tax level. I think that's probably easier than trying to construct a specific recommendation to pick that up. And then also I'll do that other paper for Councillor Stewart for the Isle of Wight budget setting.
Right. All right then. Members, are you content with that arrangement?
Yes, Chairman, very content.
Right. Okay. So Thank you for that, Rob. Members, any other comments, any other questions that you have?
Chairman, John.
Yeah.
I just want to.
Glenn, yes.
Thank you. I just want to congratulate Rob Carr on his presentation. As said before, during a very difficult period, the professionalism is second to none. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor.
Well, certainly I'd wish to endorse that comment from Councillor Glenn. These are absolutely unprecedented times, well, the work involved to present accounts is just, well, it's just incredible. Do you have some? All authorities are in the same position, so you could all meet up somewhere and swap stories about what you're trying to do. Gosh,
I do tend to say though, Chairman, at the end of the day, I'm just dealing with numbers on a spreadsheet, and I think you know, working with the Fire and Rescue Service certainly keeps me grounded.
Yes.
To what they've had to do compared to what I've had to do.
Yes, thank you, Rob. So I can see a hand up here. Somebody else wanted to ask a question. Katie, yes, we're going to move to the recommendations, Katie, but this is the budget paper, so it has to be a named vote, doesn't it?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I was going to ask whether you would be happy to do a roll call vote on this item, as it's quite substantial.
I think it's appropriate that I should read the recommendations, and then if all members are happy to take all the recommendations on the addendum, it's 11 to 23. We can do that on block. We can do that, I think, Katie, can't we?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you, Chairman. If members are in agreement.
You all happy with that, members?
Yes, Chairman, in agreement.
Well,
yeah, agreement.
Okay, so I will, for the benefit of the tape, I will read these recommendations, because I think that is important. So, members, we've moved to the recommendations for item 11, the budget precepts requirement for 2021-22. So I will read the recommendations as set out in the addendum to the report. Well, it says on the paper addendum to agenda item 11. Number 11. Pardon?
Yes, we've got it, Chairman.
Yes. The use of the grant equalisation reserve to balance the budget for 21-22. Number 12, the revenue budget as set out in Annex 2 of the addendum. Number 13, the capital programme and funding as set out in Annex 3 of the addendum, including the addition of £100,000 to purchase new corresponding vehicles. 14. Funding of up to £2 million from a capital payments reserve for the redevelopment of Redbridge Fire Station to replace prudential borrowing, which will be swapped to fund other capital schemes. 15. The reserve strategy as set out in Annex 1 of the addendum.
Annex 4, Chairman.
I beg your pardon. Annex 4, yes. I'll read that again. 15. The reserve strategy as set out in Annex 4 of the addendum. 16. The Treasury Management Strategy as set out in Appendix E to the main agenda item, including the annual investment strategy for 2021-22 and the remainder of 2020-21. 17. Delegated authority to the Chief Financial Officer to manage the Fire and Rescue Authority's investments and borrowing according to the Treasury Management strategy statement as appropriate. 18. Delegated authority to the Chief Financial Officer to make any final minor changes to the budget using compensating adjustments to the level of the draw from reserves in order to balance the overall budget. 19. The capital and investment strategy as set out in Appendix F to the main agenda item for 2021-22 and the remainder of 2020-21. 20. The Section 25 report as set out in Appendix G of the main agenda item, which should be taken into account by the shadow authority in agreeing the budget and council tax, noting the reduced deficit and reduced draw required from the GER. 21. The council tax requirement for the authority for the year beginning 1st of April 2021 of £49,158,022. 22. That the new combined fire authorities tax be increased by 1.99% above the alternative notional amount set for 2021, bracket £69.06 for the year beginning 1st of April 2021, and for the properties in each band as set out below. Band A, £46.95, Band B, £54.78, Band C, £62.60, Band D, £70.43, Band E, £86.08, Band F, £101.73, Band G, £117.38, Band H, £140.86. And finally, 23, that the precepts set out below, totaling £49,158,022, are issued on the billing authorities in Hampshire, requiring the payment in such instalments and on such dates set by them and previously notified to the authority in proportion to the tax base of each billing authority's area as determined by them. And I will read these. Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council, 4,692,554. East Hampshire District Council, £3,620,600. Eastleigh Borough Council, £3,364,749. Fareham Borough Council, £3,085,151. Gosport Borough Council, £1,882,087. Hart District, £2,891,518. Havant Borough Council, £2,919,184. Isle of Wight, £3,752,482. New Forest District Council, £5,038,471. Portsmouth City Council, £3,978,443. Rushmore Borough Council, £2,275,529. Southampton City Council, £4,534,917. Test Valley Borough Council, £3,543,756. Winchester City Council, £3,578,581. The overall total being £49,158,022, as set out in the commencement of recommendation 23. Just going back to that preamble of 23, it says here, billing authorities in Hampshire. It doesn't mention the Isle of Wight there, Rob.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I noticed that as well. So that that could be amended to Isle of Wight. Apologies for that.
I think that should. Katie, can you pick that up, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
The remaining, the last recommendation, the preamble, second line, authorities in Hampshire, and it should say and Isle of Wight. So we'll add that in.
Thank you, Chair.
We wouldn't want you to miss out. So
it never ceases to amaze me how the chairman considers the Isle of Wight. I'm almost thinking that we should make sure he comes over and visits.
Yeah. Right. So back to you, Katie. So I've read through all those, and everybody is content with the recommendations, and they've agreed that we can accept them on block. So over to you to deal with that situation, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So members, I'll go through alphabetically, and if you could just confirm whether you are voting in favour of the recommendations, against or abstaining. So Councillor Carter.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Chad.
For.
Thank you. I understand Councillor Fairhurst has now left the meeting. So Councillor Vizakali.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Glenn. Thank you. Councillor Hockley. Thank you. I think I saw you say 4. Is that a thumbs up, Councillor Hockley? Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Councillor Mintoff.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
4.
Councillor Stewart.
4.
And Councillor Vaughan.
4.
Thank you. They're supported unanimously, Chairman.
Well done, Chairman.
Thank you for that, members. So that concludes that important agenda item 11, and we can't leave this item without my again expressing our overall appreciation to Rob Carr and his team for all the work that they do to present their accounts for us, and it's not just this meeting. We've had financial updates at APAG and previous meetings. So thank you again, Rob, on behalf of the authority for all that you do from the financial point of view. We really
Thank you, Chairman. I'll pass that on to the team.
Please do. Good. Thank you, members. So now we move to page 123 in your pack, item 12, which is terms of reference for Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire Authority Firefighters Pension Board and membership of the board. Paul, you're going to present this report.
Thank you, Chairman. After what was obviously a very complicated and important item, we hopefully move to something that's a little bit more straightforward. So this report deals with the Firefighter Pension Board and how that will then be constituted in the new combined authority. Members will probably be aware that as a scheme manager in the Firefighters Pension Scheme, Hampshire Fire and Rescue Authority is required by statute to have a pension board to support the authority in governance of the scheme. The same will obviously apply to the new combined authority with effect from the 1st of April. So this paper is intended to allow the new combined authority to set up a pension board with effect from the 1st of April and to appoint members to it, so that a planned meeting in April of the board can take place. Now, the paper sets out also the proposed membership of the board, and that is basically the current membership of the Hampshire Pension Board with the 2 employed members of the Isle of Wight Fire Service joining it. So that's Sean Harrison and Ross Singleton who'll join. And one of them will be designated an employer representative and one as a scheme member representative. So we maintain the equal number of each, which is another statutory requirement. So the paper, therefore, in the recommendations, asks the authority to approve terms of reference, which are set out Appendix A, and these are based on the existing Hampshire Fire and Rescue Authority Pension Board's terms of reference, with amendments obviously to the name and a minor amendment just to allow for appointment of chairman for the remainder of this municipal year. And then it also asks the authority to appoint the members to the board as set out in the report with effect from the 1st of April. So happy to take any questions.
Right, so thank you, Paul. Councillor Mintoff, you have your hand up.
I have, Chairman. Thank you very much. I'm just slightly curious as to, you know, I mean, we have sort of the pension board that is currently constituted for Hampshire. Now, obviously, we're going into a new authority. Is it intended? I mean, obviously, as a stopgap until the beginning of the next municipal year, the Isle of Wight does need some you know, I can understand why that representation is needed, but is that the plan going forward, that there's 3 from Hampshire and 1 from the Isle of Wight?
Well,
you know, sort of on both sides, you know.
No, I understand, and actually it was probably clumsily explained by me when I went through this, because the 2 members who are joining are currently employed by Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service, but of course will transfer to the employment of Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue on the 1st of April. So the pension board becomes a board of Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority, and is therefore made up of people who are appointed out of either the employees of Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority, or members as well, members of the authority who can be appointed. So it's not actually a representative from the Isle of Wight as such. They are all representatives of the new service combined and the new authority.
If I can come back and turn my camera on. Sorry, my camera keeps turning off because of bandwidth issues, so apologies for that. So you are looking at, in future, having 4 employer representatives and 4 scheme member representatives? Is that correct?
Yes, that would be the constitution of the pension board, unless or until the authority at a future time decides to change it.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for the clarification.
Right, well, you've set out the background, Paul, in paragraph 4, that says that pension boards are mandatory. It became so in 2015, and clearly we need a new pension board when the new combined authority is formed on the 1st of April. I think this fulfills this that requirement, and well, going forward, the membership will be changed as if that becomes necessary. Members, we've got the recommendations on page 125, which the report says that was discussed at pension board meetings, and the recommendations are being supported. Anybody got any other comment to make? No, right. So okay, well, so I'll read those recommendations. Number 11, that the Shadow Authority approve the proposed terms of reference for the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority Firefighters Pension Board as set out in Appendix A. And 12, that the Shadow Authority approve the membership of Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority Firefighters Pension Board as set out in paragraphs 6 and 7 of the report, and appoint the representatives as set out in paragraph 7 for a 4-year term to take effect from the 1st of April 2021 in accordance with the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority's Firefighters Pension Board terms of reference as set out at Appendix A. Everybody content with that?
Yes, Chairman.
Fine, so that is agreed. Thank you. Now we move on to item 13, which is still with you, please, Paul. And that is member allowance scheme for 2020-22, which is set out before you in the paper. It recommends, somewhere I've read that you've set up a working group in due course. I can't find it. Anyway, sorry, I'll invite you, Paul, to present the report.
Thank you, Chairman. It hopefully a fairly self-explanatory report and part of our continuing governance arrangements to make sure the new CFA is operating properly from the 1st of April. So in order to ensure members continue to be able to receive allowances for being authority members, the new combined authority needs to adopt a member allowance scheme. And broadly, the suggestion in the paper is that initially we adopt a scheme in line with the current Hampshire scheme with the same levels of allowances, but we've reached the point now in any event where that scheme would be due for review. So the paper suggests that we undertake that review during the year 21-22, because obviously that will give us the ability to feed into it more knowledge around what the role of members on the new combined authority might be and what the levels of commitment and workload might be. So it recommends adopting the current scheme just for next year, and during that period having a review which will come back to the authority probably this time next year with some recommendations for a scheme going forwards. It does, as the Chairman pointed out, suggest appointing a member working group to undertake that review, but I'm suggesting we appoint that member working group at the June meeting, so it's after the elections, so that we don't end up with having to change any members on that working group. There is a requirement before setting a member allowance scheme to have regard to recommendations of independent remuneration panels. Now, for a local authority, they are required to have their own independent remuneration panel. A combined fire authority isn't required to have one, but it is required to have regard to any recommendations that have been published by the constituent authorities, IRPs, to those constituent authorities. So we have included links to the published IRP recommendations in the report. None of them, from what I can see, would materially affect the proposal in this report. And obviously what we would do as part of a fuller review next year is, if members want to, would seek the views of the chairs of the IRPs and the constituent authorities. So I think that's probably all I need to say about that, but happy to take any questions.
I see it. I've got a hand up from Councillor Glenn.
Yes, I'm sorry for interrupting you just there, Chairman. Thank you very much. A very clear explanation. I agree with the continuing with the existing allowances for ease of purpose. And I also agree with a working group being set up after the May elections for obvious reasons. So I'm happy to go ahead and agree with this, Chairman.
Thank you. So if there are no other questions, no other comments, we can go to page 140 and take those recommendations, and I'll read them. Number 17, that having had regard to the recommendations of the relevant IRPs, Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority agrees to implement the members' allowance scheme set out in Appendix 1 from 1st of April 2021 to 31st of March 2022. 18, that it be noted that a member working group will be appointed at the annual meeting of the authority in June 2021 to conduct a review of the members' allowance scheme with recommendations for a new scheme to be brought back to the authority by 31st of March 2022. You all happy with those recommendations, members?
Agreed.
Yep, agreed.
Thank you very much. Before we move to agenda item 14, I'm conscious of the fact that we've all been working here for approaching 2 hours. So would you all appreciate a short break, 5-minute break?
Chairman, I'm happy to carry on. If you were going to organise a break for dinner, for lunch.
No, I'm not suggesting that. I'm just asking you if you'd like a 5-minute break.
Well, I'm
break.
okay, thanks, Chairman.
Anybody else want to? Everybody's okay to carry on?
Happy to carry on, Chair.
Okay, right, we carry on. We move to item 14, please, on page 143. Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority statutory officer appointments. And this is Matt Robertson to introduce this report, please. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Chair, and afternoon, members. So this report is the last one aligning the key roles and responsibilities for the new Combined Fire Authority. And as the Chairman's introduced there, asks for the approval for appointing the 3 statutory roles. This follows off conversations at Fire Authority previously around the role of Hampshire County Council historically in undertaking this function, overseeing the administration of the authority. And you'll see the history of that outlined within the report. So the report looks on page 147 at the options, which fundamentally are to continue with the existing arrangements through the County Council, or option 2 to appoint the Chief Fire Officer as the clerk and keep the Monitoring Officer and Chief Finance Officer the same in the officer appointments as outlined within the recommendations. Hopefully the report's self-explanatory. Happy to take any questions members may have.
Right, Councillor Price, I think you were first there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'm very pleased, having raised this at the very beginning when we looked at the unitary, the combined authority. I think this is the right way forward because it does give the wrong impression if the Chief Executive of the county is actually the Chief Officer of the Fire Authority, which includes the Isle of Wight. So I think this is totally the right way forward and fully support the recommendations within the report. So very pleased. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sharon, Councillor Mintoff, you have your hand raised.
I have. Thank you, Chairman. Just wanted to make sure that our Chief Fire Officer is okay with being the clerk. And like Councillor Price, I also welcome this. It brings us sort of, it takes us from when the fire was a county function to sort of a combined fire authority function. So thank you.
Well, I'm sure he's happy with it. We won't call him the clerk. Councillor Stewart.
I too will be supporting this. It's a shame we're not calling him the clerk, because I had this vision of the Chief Officer coming to the Isle of Wight with this great big case of all the work he's got to do. But I'm sure we'll carry on in our normal way. But yes, absolutely support this.
Thank you. Well, I'd agree with the recommendations. I think it's the ideal time. A new authority and a new statutory appointment, and I think it's appropriate that well, this is the time to make that change.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, I just wanted to say I agree with option 2 as the preferred option, but I do love the idea of the new title, Clark Odin. That really is a nice title.
Okay, right. So I'll take you to the recommendations on page 148. So reading those 22, the appointment of the Chief Fire Officer to ensure the administration of the new combined Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority be approved by the Shadow Authority for commencement on the 1st of April 2021. That the appointment of Hampshire County Councils Deputy Head of Legal Services, Paul Hodgson, as Monitoring Officer be approved by the Shadow Authority for commencement on the 1st of April 2021. That the appointment of Rob Carr as Chief Financial Officer and Section 151 Officer be approved by the Shadow Authority for commencement on the 1st of April 2021. That the Shadow Authority delegate to the Monitoring Officer to make any consequential changes to Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority's constitution to be brought to the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire Authorities for approval on the 14th of April 2021. Everybody in agreement with that?
Absolutely.
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now we move to item 15 on the agenda, where can I have a recommendation, please, that we exclude the press and public?
Formally proposed, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Happy to second that.
Thank you. So all in agreement?
All agreement.
So,
Yeah.
we're excluding the press and public.
Agreed.
So we'll wait for a moment.